Hello and welcome to Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars. I'm your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. This week, we're continuing our Best of 2021 series with the second of these compilation episodes. In my mind, I'd love to have snippets from every single guest I talked to this year on the show, but that would turn these rather long compilations into even longer compilations. So I hope that this at least whets your appetite and lets you go back into the past to hear some of the things in our archives. And speaking of, I also know that a lot of new listeners like to listen to these episodes. And if you are one of those noobs, please, if there's somebody that you like hearing from, go ahead and check out their full episode. And hopefully you'll stick around for even more new episodes coming out next year. Now, before we jump into some of the clips here, I teased last week that I would discuss my plans for 2022 in this episode. So stick around towards the end of this one to hear some of the news. More importantly, though, with episodes like this, I prefer to keep my intros short. So let's just go ahead and run down my usual spiel that I do at the top of every show, and then let's get on into it. Before we begin this week's episode, I want to remind you about the different ways that you can support Trek Untold. If you're in a position to help us financially, we have a Patreon page at patreon.com/trekuntold, where you can support us for as little as $2 a month. Joining at higher levels allows you to have early access to the latest episodes, knowing in advance who our guests will be before anybody else finds out, or even the chance to submit questions to some of those future guests, and maybe your question might be heard on that episode. Shout out to our sponsor, Triple Fiction Productions, who create 3D printed toys and prop replicas inspired by Star Trek. Their items come in all shapes and all sizes and are always amazing, but you're going to hear a little bit more about them later on in the show. But most importantly, I need you to leave a review and rating on iTunes or wherever you're listening to Trek Untold. 5-star ratings and positive reviews help this show pop up when new listeners search for Star Trek podcasts and make sure that they know they're listening to something that is worth their time. If you're watching this episode in video format on YouTube, please leave a thumbs up, share the video, and of course, comment there as well. Interacting on all these platforms is a guaranteed way to spread the word about Trek Untold. So if you've been a fan of this show, please do take action in whatever way you can and help make sure that Trek Untold can reach more listeners just like you who are going to love this type of content. And don't forget to follow us on our social media pages, which includes Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. All you need to do is type in @TrekUntold on any of those platforms, search for us that way, and you will find us just like that. You can also watch the video version of this episode on our YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to at youtube.com/nerdnewstoday. The video versions are released on Sundays, so the audio version will always come first, but if you prefer watching it, that's the way to do it. We also do a lot of other Trek-related content there, including toy and book reviews and plenty of other stuff, so you might want to take a look too, just so you can indulge and get yourself a new daily dose of Trek nerddom however way you like to get it. Alright, now let's go ahead and start this week's compilation episode in a big way. And when I say big, I mean we're going to play a clip from my interview with the one and only Walter Koenig. What do you even say to the man who played Chekhov in the original Star Trek series? An actor who has said practically everything there is to say about his time on Star Trek 100 times over. Walter couldn't have been more gracious and down to earth, and I'm sure we actually did find a few things that he hadn't discussed in quite a long time on that episode. But for this clip here, let's do something a little bit more popular and well-known. Here, Walter remembers his time on the second Star Trek film, The Wrath of Khan, and reminisces about working with Ricardo Montalban and that infamous scene where Khan somehow recognizes Chekhov. So I wanted to ask you, Walter, about something that, again, I'm sure you've spoken about this in depth, but I want to hear it just straight from your mouth today, too, and that's about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. And you do mention this, of course, in the book as well, so I urge folks to pick up the book and read it for themselves. But the story I'm getting at is that scene you have with Ricardo Montalban, where he recognizes Chekhov somehow. And you talk all about that, so I'd just love to hear your take. If you could kind of tell us that story about Star Trek II and the Khan-Chekhov relationship that shouldn't be.
Well, first of all, Ricardo was a wonderful guy to work with. I mean, he'd been a movie star. He was a leading man. He had a huge history of work. One story that is perhaps a little bit beside the point, but not entirely. This was Nick Meyer's first directing job with us, and he came to it very, very professionally. And it just assumed that as director, he was ultimately in charge, the way any director should feel, but certainly television directors never feel that way, because there's always the leading characters who have the final say in the portrayal of the characters they are playing. Because the directors are there for a week, the leading actors are there forever. Well, it actually extends this to supporting actors too. never got a note, I think, from any of the directors who came on the TV series. So we're starting to rehearse The Wrath of Khan, and Nick Meyer watched us for a little bit and then asked us to retire to his dressing room for a table talk about what we're doing. Innocent as to the hierarchy of things. And we're all sitting there, and he says, Ricardo, now in this scene, it's a little over the top. And I went to myself, oh my God, here it comes. He's going to get crushed. He's going to be crucified by Ricardo Montalban. And I looked at Montalban to Ricardo. He goes, I see what you mean. Holy cow, I never expected that. Not on our set. Not on our set. You get the point. He was delightful. He had no ego. I mean, he was bigger than life, but it called for it. And what was wonderful was his casting was so strong. He was such a prominent, dominating figure that he was a great match for our antagonist. What you want in any screenplay, in any story, is that the antagonist is a match for the protagonist. Otherwise, you know who's going to win in the end, and you don't want to know entirely who's going to win. Or if you know that Captain Kirk is ultimately going to be successful, you want to know that he was in a fight. And Ricardo presented that. He was such a powerful presence on the screen. So it made the whole story, it gave it friction and this immovable object, an unstoppable force kind of thing, which is very important for storytelling. And at the same time, he wasn't a monster. He didn't have 6 tentacles. You know, he was a human being. He was a human being who had a sense of vengeance and revenge. And we have all known that in some small way, unless we've been born to be a priest or something, or a religious figure. In any case, so I thought the casting was brilliant. I thought his portrayal was great. I thought the way they used him in the story was great. And then, you know, the whole thing with Kirk's ex-wife, lover, and their son, all of that was really, really very engaging and made watching the film a great event. And of course, Chekhov did have a few things to say. Now, regarding, and I remember, which is really amazing, regarding why it played out the way it did with Khan saying, oh yes, I remember you, I remember. He didn't remember me because I wasn't in this series when he made his first appearance. But of course, he would not have remembered that in any case. You know, he was an actor reciting words, committing them to memory, and trusting that he had met before. I knew it from the get-go. I knew it before the script was shown to any of the cast. In any case, I was given the script to read before most of the actors. I had a friend on the inside who got this, and he gave it to me to read. So I read this early version of the script. Spock dies in the second act. That's preposterous. You know, you can't take one of the icons of the show and kill him off, you know, as if it was just another supporting character. And I called up Harv Bennett and I told him, you can't do it. He thought I was calling about lobbying for more to do with my character. That may have been in the back of my mind, but I never brought it up. And NBC said, I don't talk to actors. And I said, I'm not calling you as an actor. I'm calling you as somebody who's examined the story structure, and you can't kill Spock in the second act. And I said, but I'm sure you've already been told that. He said, no. And I was blown away. I couldn't believe that anybody would do that. So he was impressed enough to ask me to do a Trekkie run on the entire story. See, I'm getting to it. And I read it, and there was some little nagging things that were inconsistent, some dialogue that was inconsistent with the way we would say things. But at the same time, I recognized the fact that Spock had never met Chekhov. So I had the opportunity to be a Boy Scout and a total moron and tell him that, or just ignore it, So I ignored it. I did mention dialogue that would not be said. I did mention small things, but I ignored the fact that was inconsistent with what we had already established. And nobody else mentioned it. So we went ahead and shot it that way, which was great because it gave me more to do. I knew there would be some backlash, but I made it into kind of a joke when people would ask me, and they would ask me, everybody, at every convention, there would be somebody who would jump up so proud of knowing this detail was incorrect, that Chekhov did not meet Khan before, that I decided to make a joke out of it. And I did. I said Chekhov was on the Enterprise during the series. He was just working on the third deck behind the boiler room, and was suddenly taken with and needed to attend the bathroom facilities, and was so sick that he was there for a long time. And when the door, and Khan in the meantime was indeed in distress, in urinary distress, and was pounding on the door until finally pounding on the door. Finally, I let him in, and he said, "You, I will never forget." So I just incorporated that dialogue from the movie into my story, and I got a laugh, and everybody sort of let it go,
Well, I can definitely appreciate that. I'd probably be doing the same thing in the bathroom the entire time. So yeah. Katie Swink appeared twice in Star Trek DS9, the series where her husband, Armin Shimmerman, starred on as the lovable and devious Quark. Her first time on the series was as a Bajoran politician named Rozan, but it's her second role on DS9 in their final season as a Vorta named Luaren that we're going to highlight in this episode today. Here's what Kitty recalls from her last on-screen role in Star Trek, and what part of it was left on the cutting room floor. But yeah, since we also, we brought up now the other appearance you had, so let's just jump into that. And Kitty returns to Deep Space Nine in Season 7 in the final arc of the series. You're playing a Vorta named Luaren. I'm curious, did you audition for this episode, or was it a callback because they remembered you? How did this come about?
I don't know. They called me in, and I just got a call one day from my agent saying, "Can you go in?" And I said, "Sure." And I happened to be with Armin, and I were going to do something after he did his ADR on the episode before that. So Jeff Combs was on deck waiting to go in to loop his stuff after Armin, and we were talking. I said, I'm reading for a Vorta tomorrow. And he said, "Here's the trick. Be obsequious." I'm going to take my glasses off so I won't be able to see, but you'll be able to see it. He said, "Be obsequious and go like this." So I didn't wear glasses in those days, so I was obsequious and I flared my eyes, and I booked the job. Thank you, Jeff Combs, wherever you are.
So that's the secret to being a Vorta, is flaring your eyeballs.
Apparently, yeah.
So as for the part of Luaren, now again, this one you mentioned had a ton more makeup here. I mean, you've got that Dragon Ball Z style power scouter on your head. So tell us, what was that makeup process like? I mean, this looked like it was a lot more difficult and a lot more arduous for you.
It was long. I didn't mind these. I didn't mind these. The ears were fine, although they make you a little deaf. I had never worn contact lenses at that point, so I found them really uncomfortable because they were scleras that covered your whole eye. And then I had 3 hair pieces on to make the hair thing work, because at the time my hair was about this long. So that was uncomfortable, but it was fine. It was fun. And I think I started at like 4 o'clock in the morning and finished at 1 o'clock in the morning that night. Because they shot some stuff while I was in makeup, probably. And then, yeah. So, but it was really fun. I was working with a lot of people I knew and loved. Andy Robinson is one of our dearest friends. He killed me at DED. And John Vickery. John Vickery was on the episode, and I love him. Larry Pressman was there. I mean, it was just like it was old home week of people that I knew and cared about. So what could be bad? Andy has directed me in so much theater, and we've acted together, and I just adore him. And I just adored everybody on the episode. It was really fun. We had a good time.
And we can't leave out, of course, Nanaz in that scene as well. We've got
Yeah.
Renee's in that scene, Casey Biggs, Salome Jens, who, again, that's not the person I would love to speak with.
I didn't talk to Salome very much because I think she was just trying to she was so tired. She'd been working all week. But she was very generous and lovely. Casey and I have, of the Rat Pack review, I've been married on camera to a lot of them, including Casey and I did a movie of the week together where we played husband and wife lawyers. So, we had already done that at that point. So that was fun. Casey, Jeff Combs, all those guys are buddies. They're pals of ours. So, and we're all theater actors. So we have a lot to talk about. Yeah, it was pretty great. And Nana, it's interesting because I didn't work with Nana that much when I was working with her because we just didn't have that much interchange, but it's always so great to be in her presence when you're working because she's so focused. She's so incredibly on her game all the time. Yeah.
Now, we did mention that Luarin does not make it out of this episode at all. She is DED. So the thing is, with that episode too, we basically see you, there's some action, and then we see you on the floor. I mean, was there ever a scene where you were actually filmed being shot, or was it just kind of always going to be implied?
They filmed me being shot, yeah. They filmed me being shot, which was fun. I like being shot. I did a movie once where they squibbed my Paul Schrader film. I was playing in Patty Hearst, and they actually put a squib on my head and blew me up, but they don't show that in the movie. So I thought, so you put a pockmark in my forehead and you didn't show it? Come on, guys. But yeah, but I love doing that. And Ron Moore said, if only I had, because he created Luarin, he said, if only I had known that you were such a good woman, Vorta, I would have, replicated you and had you come back. I was like, well, too late now. Sorry, thank you very much. And scene. Yeah.
Richard Riehle is easily the record holder for the most number of TV and film roles that I've ever spoken to on this podcast. Even if you don't recognize the name, you will know who he is instantly if you see a photo of him. So if you don't, go ahead and Google him right now. His mustache is one of his defining features, which you would have seen him with if you watched his 2 appearances on Star Trek Voyager as Seamus in the Fairhaven episodes, and as Dr. Lucas from the Enterprise Augment Arc episodes in Season 4. But it's his role in the classic TNG episode The Inner Light that we discuss in this clip, a fan favorite that is also notable for Richard because it's one of the rare parts he played where he didn't have that all-powerful mustache. Let's go ahead and listen in and learn what the story is behind that. I think this is the most important question I'm going to have in this entire interview today, but when did the mustache become a permanent fixture on Richard Riehl's headshot?
It was a very strange thing that happened. I had the mustache. I've been doing a play at the Yale Rep called Moon Over Miami, and I had the mustache for the character there, and so I still had it when I came to L.A. And when I auditioned for Ferris Bueller, they wanted the mustache. So I had it for the half a year or we shot the 13 episodes of Ferris Bueller that we did. We were shooting Ferris Bueller right on the Paramount lot in a soundstage next to where they were shooting Star Trek Next Generation, and so I would run into these people all the time, and they said, "Oh, Clay, you come over here and do an episode of Next Generation." I said, "I'd love to." He said, "But you can't have that mustache if you're doing Next Generation." I said, "Yeah." They said, "Yeah, the Mike Westmoreland, who's the makeup guy, has got total control over what you're what your face looks like. And I said, it's fine. It came on and off when I was doing theater all the time from show to show. And so okay, so they canceled Ferris Bueller, and I got an audition a couple weeks later for Next Generation. And I went in, did the audition, and after the audition, they said, "Would you be willing to shave your mustache?" And I said, "Yeah." So I got cast. I did it. It was Inner Light. Played Bataille, and then while I was doing it, I had an audition for Free Willy, and I got cast in that. So I didn't have the mustache when I was doing Free Willy. So we were gone for 13 weeks in Mexico and Oregon and Seattle and up in the San Juan Islands, and I came back and still didn't have the mustache and started auditioning, and where I had been fairly successful in the auditions before that, nothing was coming through. So after a couple of weeks, my agent started calling around to the various casting people. He says, "Is there a problem?" They said, No, we love Richard. We just don't know how to use him without his mustache." So I grew it back, and I've had it ever since.
So I didn't know there was a connection to Star Trek with the mustache, so how about that?
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, since you brought up Inner Light, too, let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, we've got a lot of other things to discuss here. There's so much because, again, your resume is so big. I don't even know where to begin or where to end this thing. But on the topic of Inner Light, had you auditioned for Star Trek previously?
No, that was my first audition for Star Trek.
That's pretty rare for a lot of folks when we talk to them about their Trek appearances. Oftentimes they'll say they've auditioned again and again and again, and it's taken years for they get the role, but you nailed it first try. That's impressive.
Yeah, well, I think I knew. I mean, I had become acquainted with a lot of those people because we were working right next to each other for 6 months. So that may have been part of it. But yeah, it was. I was surprised, but happy about it as well.
This episode is a very, very beloved part of Next Generation. It's a lot of people's favorite of all time. When you first read the script and you first got it in your hands, what did you think of it?
I loved it because it offers Patrick the chance to kind of live a whole life as somebody else, and the being part of that world was very exciting because it was a world that was dying and everybody was trying to figure out how they were going to find a future of some kind, and it's a beautifully written script too. I mean, I don't know. There's something very special about it, and even as an actor in it, I felt that. And Patrick, he worked literally night and day. We would wrap at 8 or 9 o'clock at night on a shooting day, and then the AD would come up to him and say, "Okay, Patrick, we'll get you out of makeup and we'll have you home in an hour, get something to eat, because we're going to pick you up at 5:30 tomorrow morning to start over again." And he was very excited about it because I think, I mean, he said for often that this was one of his favorite episodes, and I think part of it was his son playing his son. I think that meant a lot to him too. And but it was very, again, this is this sort of sitting around talking between setups. There were a number of times when we would be waiting for the next scene to be set up, and Patrick would say something about theater, and it became apparent that both of us had spent a lot of time in theater, had done and seen a lot of stuff, and so we ended up having some really wonderful conversations between takes, and that was exciting.
Trek Untold will return momentarily.
Trek Untold is brought to you by Triple Fiction Productions. Triple Fiction Productions produces affordable and unique 3D printed Trek-inspired products from the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and the movies. Ranging from prop replicas to use in a fan film or cosplay, to accessories or playsets for figures in all different sizes, Triple Fiction Productions has got you covered. Past pieces for toys have included large centerpieces like 10 Forward from the Enterprise D, shuttlecrafts complete with working lights, and the Voyager Bridge, with smaller pieces including Borg alcoves, the Genesis device, and the dreaded arch-enemy of Worf, barrels. All highly detailed products are 3D printed and hand-painted in the USA, with new items added all the time, while simultaneously improving their printing quality based on fan feedback. To learn more about their products, visit triple-fictionproductions.net or visit them on Facebook at facebook.com/triplefictionproductions. Want to get 10% off your next purchase? Use code UNTOLD10 at checkout to receive this discount. Not applicable during sales or clearance events. That's code UNTOLD10 to get 10% off action figure dioramas, accessories, and prop replicas. Triple Fiction Productions, taking Star Trek where no 3D printer has gone before.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Frakes. If you're of a certain age, you may remember me as Commander Riker from Star Trek: The Next Generation. And my wonderful brother Daniel died with pancreatic cancer 24 years ago. They opened him up, they diagnosed, they said, "You've got 6 months to live." And that was it. He died 4 months later. And at that time, there was a 3% survival rate. Since then, we've grown to the embarrassingly high number of 10%. But a dear friend of mine, and probably all of yours, Kitty Swink, is one of those 10%. She has survived pancreatic cancer for 17 going on 18 years. Pancreatic cancer is the third leading cause of cancer-related deaths in the United States, with a 5-year survival rate. That's just 10%. And more than 60,000 Americans are estimated to be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2021. More than 48,000 will die from the disease. Because symptoms are often vague and can be hard to detect. That's why I'm supporting the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, the leading patient advocacy organization committed to fighting the world's toughest cancer. PanCan is working hard to create outcomes for this devastating disease through its groundbreaking research in early detection and better treatment options. PanCan drives progress by funding life-saving research, providing personalized patient services, and creating a community of supporters and volunteers like you who will stop at nothing to create a world in which all pancreatic cancer patients will thrive. You can help support our important mission by donating today at pancan.org. Thanks for your time.
We now return to Trek Untold.
John Fleck was a guest I had a great time with. I felt like we clicked instantly. He was very excited to chat about his insane number of appearances in Star Trek history because he had a lot of them, folks. And we had a ton of other things to discuss too that were really, really fascinating to me. Fleck is known best in the Star Trek universe for his appearances as Silik in Star Trek Enterprise. Although, as I alluded to, he's also appeared numerous times in TNG, DS9, and Voyager. All in different roles, and all of them with a ton of alien makeup and prosthetics. But Silik had a very unique look that very few other aliens in Star Trek history had. And in this clip, John reminisces about the process to become the leader of the evil Suliban, and thoughts on how his character began in the series, and the way it all ended. Let's just start at the beginning. And, as an actor, I'm just wondering, a lot of folks create backstories for their characters. For someone like Silik, did you ever approach it that way? Did you create a backstory, or did you just kind of take the role as it was and run with it? Run with what they gave you?
I think the essence for Silik was I was going to prove to Scott Bakula, to John, what was his last name? John Archer? No,
Jonathan Archer, yep.
Jonathan Archer.
You called him John in the show. Silik never said Jonathan. You always called him John.
I was going, it was who was going to win the game here. And I was going to prove that we aliens, or we Suliban, were much more intelligent than any humans. And it was quite a little chess game. I always felt like I was playing chess with John. And I was going to be on top. Of course, I always ended up on the bottom. I mean, we don't have to go into these.
We just talked about your bulges, John. We only have an hour here.
But I do remember distinctly working with Scott, and just what a gentleman he was, and so kind. And hey, once again, he came from the theater world, What a sweet, kind man, but and very professional. And but it was fun. It was fun. It's nice to have an arc, where you can kind of play with. And yeah, so in terms of backstory, oh geez, I can't remember if I try to ground it as much, reality in so much as my imagination can conjure, just so it's not just an actor saying words. But I always feel with these aliens, like backstory is like millions and millions of years of evolution, and what emotions, everything is different, but the primary thing was to win, so to speak, win the game.
Well, tell us a bit more about Scott Bakula then, because I don't really have to talk about him much on the show. I've talked to like one or two people I've gotten to do some scenes with him, but you're having not just scenes, you're getting tussles with him. In your farewell episode, you get to be out of the makeup too. What do you remember about working with Scott? Was he a good scene partner?
Oh, he's a great scene partner, very giving. A lot of times when, the camera, turns on you and they're feeding you lines, a lot of, stars don't give you much, but Scott was always there. I swear it's the theater, training. And he was just kind, and and you could talk about stuff. You didn't, I just felt very open and free with him. Plus, I'd seen him do a lot of theater, back in the early days here in LA. So we had that connection, and I think he appreciated that. And yeah, just fun, fun to hang at a cast party with him. He felt like he's just a normal guy.
Silik and Archer have a ton of fights throughout those episodes together, and I've heard that Scott Bakula is pretty handy. He liked to do his own stunts. But in terms of these fight scenes, how often was John Fleck the one actually throwing those punches and jumping around?
Well, I'm pretty physical, and then back then I was even more physical. God, that was like what, 20 years ago, about. So I didn't do a lot of stunts, the bigger stunts, but the fight scenes I try to do as much as I can. But there was always, a good stunt double ready to jump in for me, so I appreciate that. Yeah.
So in terms of the character's ultimate path, we do get to have a farewell to the character, and rewatching again, it felt like it was a little bit rushed and that Silik didn't really get to have his full potential as a character. What did you think about the way he went out?
Well, I think you might be right that it was rushed. I think they probably got an announcement that the season that, the franchise was closing, so they had to wrap it up quickly. Yeah, it's like, whoa, all of a sudden I'm going down to earth and I don't have the makeup anymore, which I appreciated. I didn't have to do the makeup, but hey, I was grateful for what I got. I got to have a little moment, man on man, so to speak, with Scott when we weren't fighting, me and my makeup, and so that's kind of what I remember. Working late into the night on the Paramount set there, and I don't know. I do remember just being there and not having. I was just so relieved I didn't have to do all the makeup, and just thinking, you know what, this is kind of an actor's dream to be working at, in Hollywood on the Paramount studio lot and got a nice scene. Hey, life is good. It was also, I do remember, I was also working at Carnival during the same time. So they had to coordinate shooting schedules. And, I was doing heavy prosthetic makeup on Carnival as Gecko. And I was doing all this heavy prosthetic makeup on as Silik. And my skin was starting to burn and flake off from all this makeup removal. So I remember the day when at the last shooting day on, Enterprise, when I didn't have to do the makeup, my skin was all peeling. So they had to do a lot with moisturizer and makeup to make it look like I wasn't, had a bad sunburn. So I do remember that.
You were doing like 10-hour makeup days on Carnival, right? Because you were doing like full body prosthetics.
Well, yeah, that was like, I think, like one of the first episodes of Carnival, and it was I had a couple full body days, and that would be probably I'd have to show up like about 3-4 in the morning, for like a 10 a.m. shoot. So I'd be pretty much in the makeup trailer, for 6 hours or more. Yeah, crazy. And then to take it off was another, 3 hours at least. But ka-ching, 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 overtime, baby.
I mean, I feel like that's got to be like the main motivator to help you sit through those 3 hours plus of makeup every time, because you did it so many times for Star Trek and other things.
I know. I did have a little calculator in there. Oh, we're in overtime. Oh, we're in golden time. Okay, torture me all you want.
On the topic of aliens, let's go ahead and jump over to a clip now from my episode with Jason Marsden. And I geeked out hard on this one because Jason was such a huge part of my childhood throughout all of his work in animation voiceover. If I start talking too much more about it, I'm going to start freaking out again, in fact, so let's just keep going with this line of thought here. And we did spend a ton of time discussing some of that VO work, but really it was his Trek appearances that were interesting to me. Jason did 2 episodes of Star Trek, but one of them was actually as a voiceover in the episode from TNG, Silicon Avatar. It was his second role, which was in Deep Space Nine, as a Ferengi named Grimp from one of my favorite episodes, Bar Association. Jason told us all about the process to become a Ferengi in an episode that was filled with orange faces and orange hands. And a fun story about Jeffrey Combs, who showed up as Brunt in that episode to try and break up Rom's union. So let's go ahead and take a listen. So was this your first time doing really heavy prosthetics for a role?
No. Well, you know, gosh, was that the heaviest, I guess? No, because I had like ears for like the Munsters, and I had hair for Erie, Indiana. I guess it was the first heavy prosthetics. I'd always been fascinated with prosthetics, and dabbled in them. I even took a class, so I always liked having prosthetics put on. But I guess this is the first time I had like the full thing on. Yeah, I still have my nose and my cheeks from my experience during the whole thing. And look, someone even there's a baseball card of the guy.
So this is an episode that is very heavy with Ferengis all over the place. So I imagine there's a lot of orange paint going on all across that makeup room. So talk to me about sitting in that makeup chair. What was that like for you?
I expected it to be like 2 hours. They had it down. They had me in and out in like 30 minutes. Wow. Maybe even less. I mean, it was just, they had it such down to a science. I mean, like you get there at 6 a.m. Some other people, some like extras, who are even in more makeup. This one woman who was in like full body makeup and prosthetics all over the place. I mean, they start at 4 a.m. and then we get in there. But you know, it was just really almost a disappointingly easy process because I love it. I'm so fascinated with it. I really want to be in there.
And this episode too is just such a fun premise as well. I mean, this is basically Rom unionizing Quark's bar.
Yeah.
Did you like the script? Was it a fun script to you?
Yes, I did. It was a departure from what I was used to. It was very heavy in comedy. You know, I hadn't watched a lot of Deep Space Nine. I did like it, but there was more heavy drama and more science fiction-y stuff with Next Generation. This episode was just bred in just this in more character and comedy, which was fine. I still had a blast. Yeah.
Yeah, somehow within both these roles, you managed to dodge technobabble twice, so that's pretty amazing too.
What do you mean?
Well, that's normally a thing a lot of actors have to do on Star Trek is they'll have to rattle off all this like technical information, like reverse the polarity and all that kind of stuff, and you managed to avoid that basically both times around.
Right, but I did get to say one of the rules of acquisition, which is a treat.
Do you remember that rule of acquisition? I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you remember that rule?
Absolutely. Rule of acquisition number 211. Employees are the rungs on the ladder of success. Don't hesitate to step on them.
And we couldn't go this far without also talking a little more about Jeffrey Combs. I mean, because he's been in so many great things, and everybody loves talking about him in Star Trek stuff. I have yet to interview him. That's the dream, is getting Jeffrey on this show too one day. Did you have a chance to chat with Jeffrey at all?
No. The first time we saw him was when the door opened and his character was there. I didn't know who it was. And also, like, if you remember that episode, like he has this relentless monologue towards everyone that I don't think we even rehearsed it. I think we just shot it. So like he arrives and we're all supposed to be like, oh shit, it's him. And we're very reverent around the ground. But he's talking. Even though I was supposed to like be looking down, I couldn't not look at him because he was so in it. And I'm like, who is this guy? I recognize this guy. And then it hit me, Reanimator, this guy, this character actor that I love so much. He knocked it out. I think he did 2 takes and that was it. I was so fucking impressed and floored by that performance. I didn't get to talk with him afterwards. I talked with him years later. We did a cartoon together and he's very nice, very accessible, very, very right there. I think he said he remembered me, but I don't think he did. He was a very sweet guy.
I had a really great year in 2021 in terms of getting some of the big names in Trek to come onto this show. Last week, we heard a clip from my episode with Jonathan Frakes. And 2 episodes after that one originally came out, I spent some time with Dr. Beverly Crusher herself, Gates McFadden. There was, of course, plenty of Trek talk in that one, but we also dove deep into a few other stories that she had about her career, including a kiss with Bill Murray that, if you don't know about that one, you better check out the episode. But of course, we're going to keep this Star Trek focus for this compilation, so let's take a listen to some of the things that Gates McFadden remembered from working on one of the, again, very fan-favorite episodes of TNG, Data's Day. And I got to ask you, of course, about Data's Day. I feel like everybody in the world is probably asking you about this. And, we haven't even talked really too much about your dance background. We mentioned a lot of your acting background. We haven't really talked a ton about dancing, but I'd love to hear about you working with Brent Spiner and getting him to follow all your crazy moves. I mean, did he have a background in dance before that?
No, he had done some maybe, in college or something, and he could do a soft shoot, the time step, and we worked on some other stuff, but no, basically we rehearsed it. And then I cast someone as his stunt double because his dance double, not stunt double. And that guy was really, really good. He was a superb tap dancer. And then they probably speeded up the camera as well, as is my recollection. So he's not only dancing incredibly fast when he does his pirouettes, but I loved coming up with that sequence. I came up with a lot of the little details that are in the sequence and even a couple funny lines that I got approved. They wrote the basic premise and stuff, but that was so much fun. Yeah, that I wish I could have done that endlessly, that kind of thing where you get to create something. But then I would not be the genius that they were when they wrote all these scientific episodes and, philosophical. I mean, they Brannon and Ron and Michael Piller and, Rick Berman. I mean, there were some incredible scripts.
I mean, Dr. Crusher doesn't really get to leave sickbay too often or really leave the ship too often, but, I've noticed that on occasion when she does, I've felt like there's been some dance moves in things. Like I was just watching an episode, I'm going to be super nerdy here. I was just watching the episode Attached, and I noticed where you basically walk up onto the transporter pad, you basically did I don't know the exact terms, but you kind of did a crossover with your legs into second position or something. It felt very, very elegant. I know, right? This is super duper nerdy. It's something I noticed.
I love it. That's so funny.
I mean, did your dancing ever dictate any of your mobility on screen?
You are who you are because of the way you move. And so that's always when I do a character, especially if it's a character that's not close to me. That's the most fun thing is what are the shoes like? How do you have to walk? And what's the weight? Where does it go? I love all that. So yes, I would assume that people on the ship needed to keep in shape and be agile. I would say Crusher, I did a lot of away teams, actually. I maybe didn't do as much as some, like Riker, but I did do, I remember because I always had to carry for several years that stupid medical kit that would open and everything would fall out. I mean, they should have talked to Louis Vuitton because there was no clasp. It would stay closed because they wanted it to open very quickly when I put it down. But meanwhile, if something happened and it just came off your hand, that was, a 3-minute pickup in the sand on planet Hell,
When I first started this podcast, I made a list of guests I wanted to have, and Patricia Tallman was literally on the very top of that list. If you don't know who that is, Patricia is a stunt performer who did a ton of work on Star Trek shows, as well as stunt work in many other big TV shows and films. But on top of doing stunts, she was also a legitimate performer, including a recurring role in Babylon 5 and many other shows where she wasn't exactly doing stunts, but acting, which is something that's very rare in that industry. Needless to say, Patricia has done a lot, and we spent 2 hours talking about some of the highlights of her career, and we really barely even scratched the surface. Here's a small taste of that as we discussed many of the alien roles she played on Star Trek, and find out about a stunt that got a little bit rough for her to do. So you did a lot of prosthetics also on Star Trek. You played a lot of different types of aliens. So I'd like to ask, which one was the worst for you to get made up, and which had the worst prosthetics?
That's a good question. Can I tell you the most humiliating?
Of course, we love that.
I mean, I was in full Klingon, and that took a long time. And then there was a Deep Space Nine episode called Melora, and she had a lot. It took a lot of time because we had this extensive wig and forehead piece, as well as the pale makeup. But the most humiliating, I got to be an actual character, and everyone was the crew was cheering for me because I got to be a character for this whole episode. I don't die till the end, so I was actually acting most of my scenes with Patrick Stewart.
Right, we're talking about Starship Mine, in fact.
That's right, that's correct. And my character's name was Kiros. Michael Westmore, who's in charge of makeup on Star Trek, is so excited. He said, "Oh my God, I'm going to make you a brand new alien we've never seen. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait." And the hair ladies, "Oh, Pat, I'm going to do something so awesome with your hair. It's going to be so great. We're so proud of you." So I couldn't wait. And my first day, I show up, and Michael basically puts a vagina on my face. It looks like there's a lady's clitoris right on my forehead. And the hair lady, Joy, teased my hair up to look like Bozo the Clown. I had to go like that through a week with Patrick Stewart. I was so embarrassed. And he's like, takes one look at me, and Patrick goes, "Oh, Patricia." Just like with deep sympathy. "Oh, Patricia." It was so awful.
And to be fair, there are a lot of Star Trek aliens that look like various phalluses or lady parts. So, I mean, you're part of the club now.
I guess so. I bore it like a champ. I said nothing. I did my best, but it was a massive disappointment, I must say. Although walking behind Patrick Stewart for that whole episode was a joy, because he's wearing riding tights. He was supposedly going horseback riding on his break, and so he's wearing these tights. And he has an awesome bum. And I got to follow him around for an entire week, so it made up for it.
And I was going to ask you about what it was like to be performing with Patrick Stewart, but I guess really the more important question is, how is his butt? So now we've got an answer to that.
We got an answer. Of course, it's amazing, and he's a delight. He's a joy to hang out with. He's a really super nice man. So I'm sure you can all imagine that. He's exactly what you'd hope he'd be,
And it's kind of a fun episode because this was basically Die Hard in space, this episode. So there is a lot of action.
Oh, yeah. And I do die at the end. As per my normal, whenever you see me on Star Trek, something bad is going to happen.
That's how it goes.
Yeah. Most of the time you don't see me, though. Most of the time I'm somebody else.
Folks like to hear this kind of stuff. We know that you have a rapport with your stunt performers, with your fellow stunties. But what about the main cast, folks you are doubling for? Because you doubled for a lot of the principal cast on different shows you were in. I mean, do the stunt performers kind of stay in their own corner on one side of the room, or do you get to really intermingle and form relationships with the principal cast members?
That's another good question. It depends on the situation. Sometimes the cast gets to take a break, a well-deserved break. So the times that they are on the set, it would require when they blend in and out of the scene. So leading up to and then after the stunt. If there's an after in the scene, or if they cut the scene and you come back later, they leave. Once they've done their ramp up to it, they're gone. I was lucky enough, because I'm there all the time, that I did have my own friendships, but out of respect, we tend to stand back and stay away from the cast so that they can focus on their lines and what they're doing. And if if they come over to interact, great, but we don't initiate it generally, unless I need to put a pad on one of my actresses, or, I need to show her what she's doing, or I need to see what she's doing so I can do what she does and then do the stunt. That kind of time we do have together. I did that with Laura Dern on Jurassic Park. But one of my favorite interactions was when I was doubling Nana Visitor for a fight scene. And Tim Russ was the Klingon in that episode. I can't remember the name of it. They have a fight, and he punches her in the face. So how that works is, whenever the camera is like over the shoulder of the principal, so if it's over Nana's shoulder, you're seeing the back of her head, but you're focused on Tim, then that's me. And if it's the other way around, then that's Tim's stunt double, and it's on Nana. And Nana is she's a dancer, so she's really good with her body, and she knows choreography. She looks amazing in a fight. It's not like she needed me to make her look good. That was not the case. Although Terry Farrell did need me to make her look good in a fight. That was not her gift. Great, that just gives me a job. But for Nana, I was just kind of feeling superfluous, like, oh my God, she doesn't need me here. They paid for me, and I don't need to be here. but we'd flip it around, and she's so cognizant. They would say, "Hey, Nana, do you want to be the in for Tim?" And she'd say, no, I need Pat to do it. And she'd go step off the set because she knew that I wouldn't make residuals unless my body is in the shot. If even my elbow is in the shot, I'll get residuals. That will qualify me for that episode. And that's very important for a performer. It's not a lot of money, but it adds up over time, right? And it goes towards your pension and your health care. So Tim was also really good, really handy, very talented. And Nana had stepped off, and this was the moment where Tim was going to throw the punch. So I'm standing in place, and we rehearse it. Tim's perfect. And as soon as they said action, he stepped into the punch, which means he closed our protective distance, and he smacked me full on in the head. And I hear the whole crew go, that intake of breath. And Dennis is like, "Pat, are you okay?" I said, don't cut, keep going, because I'm already punched. We might as well use it. It looked real because it was. So, but then I turned around to tell Dennis I was all right. That the crew did another because I had this huge lump on my head. As you know, anything on your skull and your head has blood vessels very close to the surface. They react instantly. You will bleed a lot from a head wound, or you'll bruise very quickly from a head wound. And so I had this big egg on my head. But in a way, it was great because it totally justified my entire day on the set. You know what I mean? I saved Nana from that happening to her. Completely justified hiring a stunt double for that. Turns out they also had a TV guide shoot that day. Can you imagine if she had to go to that TV guide shoot with this huge egg on her head? Wouldn't have worked out so good. Tim was mortified. He was so cute. He was just devastated. I was like, "Hey, dude, I'm fine. It's totally fine." And actually he did me a favor. So it's all good. I've seen him and teased him about this many times.
So basically this episode has now become a lot of really funny stories that were actually horrible, like when they happened. So that's our theme for this part of the episode.
Yeah, that was not really that bad. I think everybody else was so worried for me, but I was like, oh no, it's, I'm good.
Trek Untold isn't always about the actors, and I have learned that I really enjoy talking to the behind-the-scenes crews just as much as the performers. One of those behind-the-scenes crew people we had on the show this year was Max Cervantes, who was a prop maker on TNG, DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise, and a little bit of work on some of the films too. Max did a little bit of a show and tell with us, in fact, and showed us some of the props in his personal collection that he worked on or collected from his time working on Trek. And he told some wild stories that I never knew before, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys didn't either, about the things that he made. But the one that I think is very important to Trekkies is the Sword of Kahless. You might remember it from the DS9 episode that goes by the exact same name as the prop. There's a lot of rumor and innuendo about what happened to that prop after that episode aired, and Max came on the show to clear that all up. So let's go ahead and listen to Max set the record straight about the Sword of Kahless. Talking about some Klingon stuff again, you also had a hand in making the Sword of Kahless, which is like one of the most iconic DS9 props, but I know there's been some debate about what your involvement actually was, so maybe you can kind of clear up that and tell us the whole story behind the Sword of Kahless.
Well, I didn't actually build the Sword of Kahless. I made the display base for the Sword of Kahless. The Sword of Kahless was designed by Dan Curry, who's an amazing, really awesome guy, effects coordinator and designer. He also had a lot of experience in the Asian fighting arts, and so he was the one who designed the original bat'leth for Next Gen, and then from that designing the Sword of Kahless for Deep Space Nine. And then that was turned over to one of our guys who made the sword itself, which is made to look like what's called a Damascus steel finish. So it has all these undulations in it, because Damascus steel is made, I'm not a metallurgist, but from my understanding, Damascus steel is made by folding the metal over itself while it's being forged and pounded, and that's what gives it its unique texture. The original was made out of one piece of aluminum. We took a mold off of it. We cast them in either resin, hard urethane resin, or for the stunt fighting ones, they were made out of a rubber, a synthetic urethane elastomer, which feels very much like car tires. It's a little bit soft, but it has a hardness like a car tire. And then we would cast them, and then we would put the leather strapping on them. But I designed and I made the base for the Sword of Kalis. Very last minute, Alan Sims was the prop master for that for Deep Space Nine, and he was the nice of the two prop masters. Alan Sims is an awesome fellow, and it was like, oh my God, you know what? They didn't call out a stand. They never said anything about it, and so in other words, it's just going to be laying there. He says, that's not very cool looking. He says, could you make me like a stand really quick? He said, well, yeah, I have that. The year before that, I had made a costume for myself and my friend Mary Cordero, which we wore to Worldcon in San Francisco. We won first place for best workmanship for our costumes, and I designed all these Klingon glyphs, my own custom shapes and everything for it. And I pulled out the molds and I showed them to Alan. He goes, oh yeah, these will work great. He says, yeah, we can use these. And I showed, look, we can use this shape. We can put that one there. We'll put this one there, and we'll put that there and this. And so I literally designed it on the fly right there in front of him. I said, well, we'll have these two wooden rods, which will hold up the sword, and then we'll put a rectangular base on it. So I basically designed the base for the Sword of Kalis, and all of those glyphic shapes are my own design work. So that's what I did for the Sword of Kalis. And then a couple of years later, Alan, we were still working on Deep Space Nine. Alan brought me a Sword of Kalis, and it was one of the ones they had used, a stunt one that they used for fighting. It was pretty banged up. He said, could you fix this up for me? And I said, I tell you what, Alan, I have a spare casting right here. Wouldn't you rather have this bright, shiny, brand new one, and compared to me fixing up this shitty old one that's all beat up and torn? And I'll tell you what, I'll do it for you for free if you let me have the original. And that's what I did. Alan was like, I don't care. I'll take the brand new one. I'll let you have the shitty old one. But that shitty old one is screen used, and I have it to this day. I have it.
Now we know what happened to it after Worf let it out the airlock.
Exactly. And I have. Now I don't know how many of the stunt ones that they use for fighting we made. Usually we'll send 2 to set, but again, I don't know. It's been such a long time, so I might have the only one. There might be another one. I don't know, but I have it hanging on my wall in my staircase. I used my staircase kind of like as a display. So much blank walls. I used it to put stuff up on, and it hangs on the wall there with a bunch of my other Star Trek stuff. That Star Trek wall communicator I showed you earlier hangs on the same wall next to the Sword of Kalis. So I have like a little Klingon area there.
If you watch Star Trek Discovery, chances are you are in love with Linus, and really, who couldn't be? And the actor behind that Saurian makeup is David Benjamin Tomlinson. Linus is the first Saurian to serve in Starfleet that we've seen on screen, excluding the books and the video games, and David manifested that role into something that even he never expected to become as popular as it has. Here's his story about the process to become Linus, and a story with Doug Jones that helped David really find his way deeper into that part. We've spoken with several other actors who have been on Discovery who have had done very heavy prosthetic roles, and they've had all sorts of things that they've learned from Doug Jones in particular. So I'm curious what you've learned from Doug. Let's talk maybe season 1. I don't know if you had a chance to talk that much during season 1, but what are some lessons you've learned from Doug about working in the prosthetics? And then also maybe, I guess we'll take a step forward. What has he taught you about working in the prosthetics, and also about finding your character under the prosthetics?
Doug is amazing. Doug has been a remarkable mentor and a wonderful friend and an incredible ally on set. And he has provided, he's always ready. If I have a question, I'll check in with him about something, and he always has an answer. So he's incredible that way. He is absolutely incredible. And so there have been little pieces of learning along the way, and not all from Doug. So season 1, trial by fire. Klingons, very intense, exciting, very challenging, learned a lot. And we get into season 2 and we have Linus. And the first time I went to set we did a camera test for Linus, and I saw the prosthetic on the counter in the prosthetics trailer, and I was like, oh my goodness, he's gorgeous. He's gorgeous. And we put it on, and they took me to the bridge because they wanted to film me again on a set to see how the lights, how it worked with his eyes. and James McKinnon, who was the head of prosthetic department at that time. So I was like sort of orienting myself and figuring out the feel of the mask. And James came over and he whispered in my ear, he said, don't be afraid to drive the prosthetic. And that was a huge penny drop moment for me, because I was like, right, it's like a dress. It's like, don't let the outfit wear you. You have to wear the outfit. So you know, you can twist the head, you can find the language, you can do the work behind the prosthetic to really bring it to life and really punch it forward. I had a great piece of advice from Doug in season 2. I was playing in episode 6. I was playing a Kelpian on the beach, and I had to stride across the beach with my ganglia in my hand and ask my sister what had happened. And so I had to do this, those unbelievable boots that the Kelpians have to wear. So I'm managing that on the sand, and the sun is in my eyes, and I have to land on this spot, and then in the sand, keep my balance and have the ganglia and the sun, and everything just felt like it was working against me. And I said Doug and I were talking at the end of the day, and I said, God, it just felt like today, it was everything I could do just to transcend all the challenges. And he said, my boy, that describes my entire career. And I was like, oh, bang, that's a huge piece of it too, is that the job is you are constantly transcending the challenges in your way. There's never going to be a day that you aren't feeling handcuffed in some way, because you don't have your sight, or you don't have your hearing in the same way, or your balance is off. Like there's always something to transcend. And that was another huge piece. Those are 2. There's more.
I'll see if we can refresh your memory as we go along, maybe.
Yeah. I'm sure they'll pour out. They'll pour out. But being on set with Doug, and this is something else I've learned too. Being on set with Doug, I think we're both always excited when we're on set together, because it means that there's someone else holding the same kind of space. Do you know what I mean? Like when we're on set together, we both know what the other person is experiencing. And when someone is sort of in that experience with you, it just makes your shouldering of the experience lighter, because you're not alone. And so when we're on set together, it's always wonderful, because there's so much support and love. And sometimes that looks like just sitting quietly together. Sometimes we're laughing or hugging or whatever, but it's just lovely to be in the room with someone who's dealing with all of the stuff that you're dealing with. It's a pretty powerful thing.
What part of David Benjamin Tomlinson is in Linus, and is there any part of Linus inside of him?
I've learned so much from Linus. You know, what we were talking about earlier in the interview about sometimes feeling socially awkward or whatever. I feel like that's something that I have in myself, or feeling like not quite a part of things, feeling like an outsider. I feel like that's something that I've judged in myself, or feel kind of can feel negative in myself, like, oh, I wish you fit in better or whatever. And when I started playing Linus and I started spending time, I noticed that Linus was awkward as well, but that he held his awkwardness in this really confident way. Like, yes, it's hard not to, when I just want to go into him.
I don't think you can legally do that. CBS will sue us.
Yeah. I'm not gonna. But it's like the essence of the character for me is like he holds his awkwardness and his unusualness and his uniqueness in a very confident way. And I was like, oh, and it's possible to do that. I don't have to sort of like feel insecure about the fact that maybe like I talk about the cauliflower paradigm when we're talking about an important thing. Like I can just. And so that's something that I'm working on as a result of playing the character. So I think he has some of my awkwardness. I think he has some of my loyalty, because I'm a Leo. I'm very loyal to my friends and family and very protective. So I think he has those qualities. And there's a real elegance to him. And I don't know that that's mine, but there's also a weird elegance. I've learned from him, like to be confident about my own insecurities about fitting in or feeling awkward. But the teleporter episode in the 3rd season, where the thing that I loved so much about that storyline is, first of all, I love that the writer chose to kind of like just comment on the fact that we're not all easy adapters to technology. Like sometimes every time that there's an app update, or like it's fun to think that all of our heroes were in the future and everyone's going to adapt easily. But I think it's really great to kind of like point out that we don't all, like every time if there's an Instagram update or whatever, it's just like, what, how does this work? What does this feel? You know, there's that moment. And I love that was represented on the show. But I also love, in terms of Linus in that episode, is that he just didn't give up. Like we've all walked in that door at the wrong moment or sat in the chair that we shouldn't have sat in and been like, oh, and it's so tempting when those sort of like, you know, embarrassing things happen, we get shut down and we feel like, I shouldn't try anymore. But he doesn't stop trying. He just keeps working. And then ultimately he figures it out. In my mind, there was a scene that we didn't see, you know, where he ends up where he needs to go. And he's like, oh, I understand this now because I kept trying. And so like, since I shot that episode, there have been moments where I'm just like, something's gone like, ugh. And I'm like, oh, you know what? Just no, keep trying. I think especially now we're so results driven as a people right now. And like, it has to be perfect out of the gate. And it just isn't sometimes, a lot of the time. And it's tempting to be like, well, if this didn't go right, then I'm not going to do it. And it's like, yeah, you have to keep trying. And there's no shame in keeping trying. And so I love the experience of getting that kind of insight from him.
I mean, there's kind of that classic thing in sci-fi, and especially in Star Trek, where the alien is the outsider who's looking in, and eventually he does learn to basically find his way in and become accepted. And I think especially for a lot of LGBT folks might be listening and say, I mean, a lot of them will relate to a character like Linus or other similar alien types because they're trying to find themselves and they're trying to find acceptance too. I mean, have you found that as part of your process?
As a person, I have, you know, since I came out, I am a big proponent of finding your tribe. So I find my tribe everywhere I go. And I have ended up on this show that is filled with people on my tribe. It is an amazing gift. And as far as Linus goes, the crew embraces him. Like the crew absolutely accepts and embraces him. And so which is why I think he holds it in his sort of like quirks and such confidence, because he knows he's utterly respected and admired and enjoyed by the crew. And so both Linus and I have found our tribes in the Star Trek universe, and that is a huge blessing too.
And that is it for our pair of best of episodes for 2021. And I know I keep saying it, but 2021 was really an amazing year for the podcast and for me. When I first started the show back in 2020, I didn't even think anybody was going to listen to it. Here I am now, gearing up for 2022, and I can't believe I had the chance to speak to so many of these people, and also connect with all of you. It shocks me still that people actually listen to the show each week, and that my numbers actually keep growing somehow. Heck, I even have Patreon supporters, and by the way, thank you guys for doing that, and that baffles me even more. So honestly, thank you to everyone who has listened and supported the show. I really can't do it without you. So with that said, you guys won't be hearing from me for about 2 or 3 weeks after this episode airs, because I've got some stuff that I'm working on. And what is that stuff? Well, it's plenty more of the content you already like hearing from Trek Untold, but in addition to that, my goal is to give you some other things to check out. Thanks to amassing so many interviews with so many talented people in Star Trek, I'd like to launch an offshoot of this show called Tales from Trek Untold, or at least tentatively titled Tales from Trek Untold. What that would be is me compiling certain interviews together to tell stories from people who work together in Star Trek to tell one cohesive tale of Star Trek history. These tales from Trek Untold will be given to Patreon supporters first, and then released to the general public a little bit after that. So if you want to get in on these episodes before they do make it to the public, that's the way to do it. I've also been doing Star Trek toy reviews on my YouTube channel for several years now in a series called Trek Back Tuesday. And despite having an overflow of 100 Star Trek toys still in package waiting to be reviewed on video, things got a little clogged and congested this year, and I haven't had the time to really work on that as much as I wanted to. I hope to get back to that, especially with new Trek toys on the way from Playmates next year, but I really do have some other Star Trek related videos I'm working on and some other unrelated Star Trek videos as well that I want to get out next year. So keep your eyes on my YouTube channel for that, as well as my continuing series where I've been building the Hero Collector Build the Enterprise set, which at this point I'm up to now episode 6, and I'm hoping that by next year I should be a little bit more caught up and have a lot more of those coming soon too. And if you've never been on my YouTube channel before either, there's plenty of non-Trek things to check out as well, so I hope you'll give it a watch. But overall, 2021 has been a very, very busy year for me, working on Trek Untold and working on other things outside of this too. And I'm about to give myself an even bigger headache by doing all these Trek things, so I really hope you guys keep coming, that you help spread the word, and that you continue to enjoy Trek Untold in all of its many different formats, and all the stuff that I'm working on outside of it as well. So thank you, again, for choosing to listen to Trek Untold each week, because I know that there are a ton of other Star Trek shows out there, and it means a lot that you came to check us out this year. Even if it was just for one episode, or even if it was just for this episode, but even just showing up like this to listen helps us out in a big way. I hope you've all had a safe, healthy, and happy 2021. I know it's still pretty weird out there, but hey, the year is now almost over, 2022 is coming, and I hope that the coming new year is even better than this past year was for you. I appreciate your support of Trek Untold, and I hope that you guys keep baffling my brain every month by coming back here to listen to more episodes and check out my show and all the things that you guys are doing to support it. So when I tell you to live long and prosper, please know that it's coming from a very genuine place, and I hope that you do. So that's all the snippets we're going to play for you guys for this week, but make sure you come back next week to hear part 2 of the best of Trek Untold from 2021. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Trek Untold, which is just one word in all those platforms. If you're listening to this on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or any of those other locations, please leave a positive review and a 5-star rating if you can to help show other listeners how much you like this podcast and spread the word. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel at youtube.com/nerdnewstoday. If you're enjoying Trek Untold and in a position to financially support the show, I hope you consider being one of our Patreon supporters by visiting patreon.com/trekuntold, where you can help us out for as low as $2 a month and get some pretty sweet perks. Shout out once again to Triple Fiction Productions, who you can check out at triple-fictionproductions.net. If you're a collector of Star Trek toys in any size or scale, or enjoy prop replicas, you're going to love the quality of their 3D printed products, and I'm sure you will be a repeat customer. If you have any comments, feedback, or suggestions for future guests, send an email to me at trekuntold@gmail.com. I hope you'll beam up again with us next week for another episode of Trek Untold. So until then, I'm Matthew. Thanks for listening, and remember, fortune favors the bold.
Trek Untold is sponsored by TrekSphere.com, promoting fan-produced Star Trek content in all forms, is powered by the Rageworks podcasting network, and is affiliated with Nerd News Today.